Oui, ils sont là. So, well, today the class shall be in English, as I had told you. Linguistics course is in English, so you have been sent the material, and today it's the block 1, unit 1 and 2 that I'll try to wind up. Before I begin the classes, I give you 10 minutes, all of you, to put me on questions. I know there are a lot of things you want to discuss. It's been a long time we talked. So if you have any very important things to sort out, you have 10 minutes before I begin the class. Something that you want to ask me?
Madame,
Yeah,
l'adresse pour envoyer le mémoire, s'il vous plaît.
aujourd'hui, je vais vous donner. En fait,
D'accord.
après le cours, je vais envoyer sur le groupe WhatsApp. J'ai déjà eu l'adresse, je leur ai demandé. Maintenant, vous pouvez envoyer. Le 30 septembre, c'est la dernière date pour les devoirs, les assignments. Mais pour le projet, je crois, vous pouvez l'envoyer vers fin octobre aussi, ça marche. Because the project, you see, the 006 MFLP is an independent thing. It is not tagged to another course. It is an independent course. So just like you can continue with your classes till end October, so you can submit your project also till end October. It's a part of your course. Okay? But the assignments, I guess, are by 30th September. After 30th September also, I think there are some late fees or something that you need to pay. But I repeat once again, I have been battling at a lot of fronts, but please stick to handwritten now. They are really stubborn and not listening at all, but which is why now you should have very short assignments. If you would have noticed, for linguistics also, I've given you very, very short assignments. So scribbling that bit shouldn't be too much of a problem for you. So do that. Anything else that you want to clarify? No? No. When I open the WhatsApp, even for an hour, I get zillions of questions, and today you have nothing to ask, but good. So you don't have any doubts. That's a good sign.
This tune shows pour le mémoire, on peut écrire notre poids de violon à la fin.
Quelle mémoire, quel coup?
006.
Ah, okay, 006. Bon, oui. What did you say?
On peut écrire le poids de vue, notre poids de vue, non?
Bien sûr, il le faut, en fait. There have been many people who sent me, like a little paragraph on what they thought about the topic. It's almost like a term paper or a story. That doesn't work. A project is like a very critical perspective on whatever you do. So make it your point of view, your perspective. Don't just, if you're doing, let's say, a tourist brochure, a lot of you are doing tourist brochure. It's not as if you pick up a place and you start talking about the place. You have to put it in a style that it is a brochure. It is for a third person, for a French or a Francophone tourist, because understand that if you're framing a tourist brochure in French, it cannot be for Indian tourists. It has to be for a French-speaking tourist. So keep all those things in mind when you're, for any of the things that you're picking up, any of the topics. Have a critical perspective on that. Well, have you people looked through your first 2 units? Please, the memoir, the memoir, someone is asking if it's typed or handwritten. No, that you have an option of typed or handwritten. But it has to be spiral bound, and like typical projects that you submit, it has to come to the address I give you today. It should look like a project and typed. Please respect the number of words that's been given. Do not exceed 4,000 in any case. Although I have said 3,500, so maintain between 3,500 and 4,000 for the memoir.
Madam, excuse me.
Yes.
The word limit was 2,500 to 2,700.
For the memoir,
Yeah.
it was not 3,500.
वही madam say 2,500 to 2,700.
Okay, so because anyway, so I mean, let it in that case, then don't let it go beyond 3,000. If it is 2,700 from my end, I make it like an informal deadline at 3,000. Don't go beyond that.
Okay.
And definitely a spiral bound thing. Okay.
Ça va.
Now, est-ce qu'on peut commencer la linguistique?
Ma'am, regarding the paper, it's a
Which
full
paper?
scale paper or A4 paper?
A4.
A4 only. Okay, handwritten.
No, there in memoir you have a choice. I repeat, you make it typed or handwritten. It's a choice, but because it's a project, it is called a project. It can be typed also.
And for regarding the first MFL 001.
The rest all handwritten, uniformly. 002 you all sent me on email that
2, 3.
after 2, please make it all handwritten. 002 is okay, submitted on email, typed, I accept. Beyond that, don't risk it. Because you can ask one of your batchmates. It was difficult.
MFL 1.
Only MFL 002, that the first assignment that you all did about Civilisation Française et Francophone, that is the one you sent me on email. Only that I accept as typed and on email. The rest, all of them, please maintain handwritten and by post.
Ma'am, bonjour, madam.
There is a slight risk there because they're behaving very, very stubborn.
And the paper is a ruled one or a plain paper?
That is your choice. I don't put, I mean, if you want to do a handwritten, it's good, I think more convenient to have a ruled paper. You see, I'll also tell you what their perspective was when I was discussing with them this matter. They said, Madam, all these assignments are a part of a certain course. Agreed. They said the end term exams, the people will come to the exam center and write. So if those exams are handwritten, assignment, which is also 30% of that same evaluation process, should also be the same way. So they said that is the reason why IGNOU has formulated this. That if it's like the big brother, the term end is handwritten, the small younger brother, that's the assignments, is also handwritten. Although I do believe from my point of view, it's a rather archaic system and they really need to take a relook. But, because they're behaving a little stubborn, so I shall let go. Only 002, I accept the first thing you sent me. The rest, don't risk. They are really stubborn about that.
Bonjour, madam. The question is related to a brochure only. Ma'am, to make it more artistic, can we use Canva?
You can. What I am bothered about is la présentation, le style et la langue. And something as basic as spellings, please take care of your spellings. I know all of you are also working and, not too much of time, but take care of that. Also, yes.
In that case, Canva, I think it can't be spiral one. It will be the brochure type, the 3-fold or 4-fold.
Listen, I have realized one thing at the administration. They are very used to seeing something in a particular format. So even if you're preparing a brochure, put it in spiral bound. If they see a 3-fold, 4-fold thing, they'll say, "Ye to project nahi hai."
Okay, done.
They're very concerned with the physical formatting of the thing, and it's very tough to argue with clerks who have been in the system for 20 years, 25 years. It's very difficult to battle it out with them. So just make it spiral bound. They should just look at it and see it's spiral bound. They'll be happy.
Done, madam. Done.
So
Merci beaucoup.
Bonjour, madam.
Yes.
Regarding the same, need we have to describe the city before making a brochure?
Always remember that a brochure is always at the end of the day directed at the tourist. So even if you're presenting a city, present it in a way that it's a tourist who's reading the information. It's not you. So it's for a stranger, more importantly, a francophone, a French, because your brochure is in French. So remember, from that perspective.
So you can say, like, for a tourist person, like the information is provided in such a manner that any tourist or any traveler will visit, and then he would like to.
Not, while one is sitting in France or some francophone country and planning to come to India and picks up the brochure, what is the information that will be before his eyes?
Okay, it should not be like guide, I mean, like city guide.
Not really. It's not a guide. Guide is different. Tourist guide. If you're making, now listen, that is a question that we could consider. If you're framing something like a tourist guidebook, then the whole matter changes. I'm not forbidding you. If you want to do it in the form of that, then it will certainly not be like a brochure.
Yeah, because brochure is too small to be presented as a project.
So then I leave the choice to all of you. If you want to follow the tourist guide format, it's like those you have a lot of these tourist books.
Yes, kind of thing.
Yes. So you can follow that pattern, and then the whole style and the presentation change.
Yes, ma'am.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Now tell me, as I begin my class on linguistics, this is how many people here have done linguistics before your MA classes, ever touched linguistics? Nobody? Okay. Okay, Anish, you've done. So I had sent some very simple videos also, and you have your set of SLMs also, the write-ups. Now, I'd like to hear from some of you, what exactly did you come about understanding this discipline called linguistic? And to give you a clearer idea, in Hindi, we call it Bhasha Vigyan. So it's the science of language. Okay. So now, some of you, please enlighten me what you have understood regarding linguistics. Yes? You can't be sitting quiet. You have to tell me something. What do you understand by linguistics? Yes, Anish, you said you have touched upon it. How do you understand?
Yes, ma'am, I had studied during my Hindi studies, Bhasha Vigyan, this was the topic. Ma'am,
Yes.
there we studied how the language was born, the etymology and pronunciation of the words, and the structure, the we call it.
Yes.
Yes.
So, linguistics, as you rightly said, Anish, is the science of language. Language is something which we normally take for granted always. However, as students of language, if you look at the whole thing, give me a moment, I'll just be back. My pet is... Terribly sorry, my pet was being a nuisance. So, anyway, so I was just telling you, language in itself is a system. And whenever you talk of anything as a system, there is nothing random about it. It is a very structured, very formal form of the spoken language that you have or the written language. And surprisingly, when you're doing linguistics, a very major part of linguistics also includes non-verbal communication, where there is no language. So that in technical terms, you would have perhaps heard as body language, soft skills. These are also part of language studies, part of the non-verbal communication, because the entire notion of linguistics, the entire notion of language studies, uh, inherently you feel it's about the words, the language, the spoken language, the written language. That is about language. But there is something called communication without language, and that's the non-verbal aspect of language, which is also a part of linguistics. So we'll come down to that slowly. Have you people tried reading through the 2 units that I earmarked for today, Saturday? Have you been through? Okay, let me do some screen sharing just now. So, you follow with me as the first unit. This is the first unit. Can you see the screen, all of you?
Oui, madam.
Oui, madam.
Yes. Now, this is the introduction to the course on linguistics and a brief structuration of the entire course. That is the block 1, which talks about some of the major movements, major theories of linguistics. Block 2, which again talks about, the basic building blocks, the basic structuration of language, where you have something called phonetics, morphology, syntax, and semantics. Then the third block, it's about something called sociolinguistics. That talks about the various aspects of language and its use within society, within a sociocultural system. That is sociolinguistics, which we handle in the third block of the material that I've given you. Now, let me begin with Unit 1, which is called The Nature of Language. Now, one second. In all honesty, tell me, how many of you have actually gone through Unit 1 and Unit 2? Tell me. Don't hesitate. There's nothing terrible about it. If you
I gone through the Unit 1.
Okay. Anyone who has gone through both? No. Why I'm asking you is that there is a lot of matter in Unit 2, which is also there in a simpler form in Unit 1. But Unit 2 is a slightly higher level. So if there had been anyone here who had read both the units, you would have understood that there are a lot of, parts which are being tackled differently in Unit 2 and more elaborately. So for someone who's just a beginner in linguistics, and as you see, the name of the course is Introduction to Linguistics. So we assume that you all are beginners and that most of you have never known what is linguistics. So that is why this is quite an initial step into the world of science of language. And I request you to please stop me wherever you want to clarify anything about this, okay? So now you see the structure and Now, here, as you see the screen, you have various definitions of language that have been promulgated by different linguists at different points of time. You can read up on that. These are some things which you should know. In fact, you see the first definition is by Fromkin and Rodman. Remember that if you get hold of this book ever, this is one of the Bibles of linguistics, Introduction to Linguistics. Even I studied my linguistics from this book. One of the very basic introductions and very nice book. So there they say they define language as being the most sophisticated and versatile means available to human beings for communication of meaning. So when you say language, the primary function of language is communication. There also has to be a certain agreement on the meaning of the words. You see, when you are within a particular community and you have people around you who you believe they understand the language you're talking, like for example, now I'm talking in English, so there is an implicit agreement between me and my audience that we all understand English. So when I say cat, I definitely mean a cat. And if there be a situation where you're communicating with a group that does not understand the language that you're speaking, obviously there'll be a rupture. There'll be a rupture in communication because what you are saying, that is not going through to the audience. So that is why I say it is a system within which the speaker and the receiver, they both have to be within a range of mutual understanding. And that forms the basis of human communication. Now, why is this so important and unique to human communication? This is so because communication also exists in the animal kingdom. Bees also buzz and dogs bark. And at times, in forests, you say the monkeys, they chirp in a certain way. If they see a tiger coming from top of the trees, they see, and they start making a particular sound to warn the other fellow monkeys that there's a tiger coming. So those are typically codified types of communication that the animal world uses. But human language, why is it not the same? It is not the same because it is built up of a language which changes in space and time. When you speak French, you speak with a different set of French words, of French sounds. And when you speak another language, you speak with a different set of words and sounds, which is not there in the animal kingdom. Perhaps a monkey in America would be chirping exactly in the same way as a monkey in Bengal. So in animal communication, there is a certain homogeneity in the way communication is transferred, is communicated, is transacted. But human language is something where society to society, community to community, the patterns of communication keep shifting. And that is the uniqueness of human language, why they say that this is perhaps the highest form of culture and civilization that the human society possesses vis-a-vis animal kingdom. Now, just a second.
What about the tribal language?
Yeah,
They will be
tribal
communicating
language.
through sound only, no?
No, tribal language, they have their own codes. And if they're speaking their particular language, within their community, they are mutually able to understand each other. It is not anything like a tribal language. It is simply a different language. We call it a tribal language because for us, it is a language spoken by the tribals.
No, I'm talking about the Stone Age people and the evolution of the
That's what I'm
humankind.
just coming to. The next part, I will just come to that. One sec. Now, we'll come to the origins of language, how it started. So here you have quite a few 1.2 definitions of language. Go through that. I don't think I need to, this is in English. You all can read yourselves. Now, how and why did language originate? This is exactly what you were asking just now. So there are different theories doing the rounds. How did language originate? And there are many theories whereby confirming the fact that there is not just one idea about the origin of human language. There are various theories doing the rounds. So the first one, as they say, according to one view, God created Adam, and Adam, every the living creature was the name thereof. So this is about the man coming from heaven and the Tower of Babel, all those the which is why when we were doing the units on translation, you remember perhaps that the Bible was supposed to be the voice of God. So that is how they made it into a whole divine phenomenon, that it was the voice of God from where it was brought down to earth, and that is how language originated. That is the divine source theory. And then again, they go on to say in Hindus, they always believe that it is Saraswati who has generally been identified as the goddess of learning. So various sources in Hindu scriptures also align the art of language and speech to Saraswati. That's one of the theories doing the rounds. Then there's the natural sound theory. They say that the natural sounds around them were the genesis of formal language origin. For example, they say the sound of running water, or the cock doing a cock-a-doodle-doo in the morning. So in Hindi, you have this saying, kukruku, and English you say cock-a-doodle-doo, or a dog barking saying bow wow. So these are natural sounds which surrounded human civilization. And there is a certain theory which says that it is the natural sounds which are at the root of creating more sophisticated language forms in the decades to come. That is one of the theories, which is called the natural sound source theory. Then there's something called the poo-poo theory, where Darwin, they related to Darwin's descent of man, and he says language originated as man's attempts to express his emotions. In other words, when human beings were trying to communicate to their fellow human beings, that attempt of expression of emotions was at the root of creation of language. So this again is it sounds a little funny, because why this is called the poo poo theory. You would have noticed at times, when you want to mock a certain thing, you say, I don't believe that. Poof, that poof. So that poof, a lot of people who dismissed Darwin's theory, they would just mock at his whatever claims, and this theory gradually came to be known as the poo-poo theory. So, well, that is the recognized format, so you must know about it. Then the ding-dong theory, Muller, contemporary of Darwin, he proposed the ding-dong theory of origin of language, and he talked about an intense relationship between sound and meaning. So the word ding dong automatically brings to your mind the idea of a bell. So when the bell, a solid object, is touched by another solid object, and the sound, the ding dong, comes across. So that is a kind of I'd say it was a way of associating development of language from originating from an external stimuli. If an external agent created some kind of sound with physical a touch or a physical bang or a ding. They said it was at the origin of further development of language. So they called it ding dong, basically linking it to a bell. All these are Western theories of language of origin. I'll come to the Indian ones soon. And well, here, if you look at the screen, they have listed down a few basic functions that human language is supposed to perform. As I said, one of the most basic functions of human language is communication. Apart from that, they have described the following ways in which one can use language. So to give factual information or to convey commands, this is called information talking. In grammatical terms, this is called the imperative voice. When you give a command, go there, come here, do that, look there, do this. Those are little commands. So you're using language to pass on an order and to pass a command. Then the second one is to convey emotions and feelings, which was also the theory propounded by Charles Darwin, that in his attempt to express emotions, man attempted to make sounds, which later went on to become more sophisticated language forms. So to convey emotions and feelings. And then to maintain social contact on a friendly level, which is called the phatic communication or language of social or small talk. So this is again language performing the function of social bonding. As I told you, we'd be later doing aspects on socio-linguistics as well. That language is something you need to understand is a part of socio-cultural system, and it exists between people within a community. So in order to maintain relations, in order to maintain that the basic communication between members of a community, members of a group, you use language. Even today in the virtual world, when you're typing messages, when you're typing comments and remarks on Facebook and Twitter, you're using, at the end of the day, you're using language. Although we also have those emojis we use, those are, again, evolving from pictorial scripts. Now we have the formal script that we use in language today. But whatever, I mean, you use a certain way to communicate what you're feeling. And language, human language, is the superior most form of those expressions. Then you have, for aesthetic reasons like poetry, or maybe to write stories, creativity in various forms, or to relieve nervous tension. Now that is a theory which was very popular when a lot of studies were happening in the first half of 20th century on psycholinguistics and psychology. So a lot of times this was said that the way you speak or whatever you don't speak becomes the root cause of psychotic problems, of what you say, nervous breakdowns. So those were the days when Freud and a lot of psychologists in the Western world were doing scientific study, and they were trying to link the role of language and speech to various kinds of problems, or the way a person thought, the way language was influencing mind and behavior. So these were the areas where language, one never thought that this could impact these areas also. But today, psychologists and psychiatrists, they see that language is very deeply linked to these. And not only just literally saying that, it's even the particular neurons, the particular sides of the brain which are more sensitive to language reception, language learning. And that is how neurolinguistics, an extremely codified and a very, what should I say, specialized domain of linguistics, neurolinguistics, which almost crisscrosses with medical sciences and language studies. Just like you have sociolinguistics, you also have neurolinguistics. So that does a kind of a medical study of the mind and the impact of language. So those are, bits that you need to know what exactly is this science of linguistics all about. Oh well. One sec. Now, after this, we come to the characteristics of human language. What are the special points which distinguish human language from other ways of communication? Now, use of sound signals. So, you do understand that when we're talking about language, at least when you're talking about spoken language, it definitely entails an element of sound. When you speak, you're creating sound. So that is something where it is an within a system, because even if you're using the sound, it's not random. You're not just saying ah, ooh, ooh. It's not random. And in later units, when we do phonetics is to give you an idea how each sound is put within a systematic pattern of creating words, and those words further creating sentences, and from there you derive meanings. So when you go down to the tiniest bit of how language goes on to be a part of a system, that is where you go to sound. In the Hindu scriptures, I don't know how many of you have heard of Panini. Have you heard of Panini, the great linguist? Yes,
Oui,
good.
madame. Il avait écrit Ashtadhyayi, son livre
Yes.
Vyakaran, grammaire de Vyakaran.
Panini was one of the, I'd say, the greatest intellectuals who worked on in Sanskrit, and he was the first person to have brought out a systematic scientific study of language as a system. Earlier on, there used to be a lot of writings on language in Sanskrit, arts and dance and theater and this, but language, taking it up as a unit and dissecting it part by part and presenting a scientific research. Panini was the first person who wrote his seminal work, which is called the Ashtadhyayi. It's called the Ashtadhyayi. Ashtadhyayi, the word has come from Ashtadhyayi, which means 8 parts. Ashtadhyayi, it's a phenomenal study on Sanskrit grammar, which the Western linguists have also accepted as one of the finest studies in language and linguistic sciences. In fact, before I go on to discuss this linguist, if you had read these units in detail, there's someone called Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure was a Swiss linguist. Of course, he wrote in French. So he is considered the father of structural linguistics. And much later, it was found out that Saussure actually read Panini's work, and that had inspired him to write what he wrote later. Of course, half the world doesn't know that Saussure's work were actually a product of his inspiration from the work of Panini, the Ashtadhyayi, and the structural linguistics that Panini was a man, yes. Somebody is asking me. It was his name. Panini was his name. Okay. And he was a resident of Northwest India, which is now in Pakistan. He stayed there and he created this wonderful work. So please look up Panini's Ashtadhyayi on the internet later, and you will find this. In fact, instead of looking up text, I suggest you all can go and look at small little lectures on YouTube. And you should also know that linguistics, the science of linguistics, is very inherent to India. And much, much before the West even stepped into doing anything on linguistics, India had already talked about it. So I will tell you in perspective how the Western theories talk about it and how 2000 years earlier the same had been already talked in our Vedas. So that I'll tell you later. But just to tell you that the role of sound, if you people have noted in our system, in India, you often hear this word nad. Nad is supposed to be the celestial sound which comes from the space, and this source of sound is at the root of creation of language. That is the Indian theories. I'm not getting too much into it right now, but I'm just telling you that most of the theories that you are reading here, the codified, the definitions, they are from the Western theories. I will initiate you into Indian linguistics, which is definitely much, much older and much more sophisticated than the Western ones. But for your knowledge sake, at the moment, you can know socio, but you should also know who inspired socio. So that being that, okay. Now, the first one is the use of sound signals. But sign language, as they say, or writing, even for written communication, there is no sound. You know very well. And another thing that I forgot to mention, when I talk about nad, the celestial sound of the universe, where they say language was created, the very dominance of oral narratives in India, long Sanskrit shlokas, they were transferred generation after generation in the oral form. Of course, there was written also on the Tamrapatra, they would write that. But the oral narrative was very important, and which is why, so that the words wouldn't get distorted in transfer orally, pronunciation was given extreme importance. It was very important that they were pronounced properly and transferred from one generation to the other in the exact correct form. So today, when you have someone chanting mantras, they have to be the exact right pronunciation that came down from generation to generation. And the oral tradition has always been considered more important than the written tradition in India. But of course, today when we talk about the science of language, it also includes very much written communication and something very important now, that's the sign language, where you have components like the Braille. Those are scripts. The Braille was, I'm sure all of you know about Helen Keller when she started this special script for the visually impaired people. So these are the kinds of communication patterns, because Braille is also where you're trying to communicate. But the script that was started as Braille was something which was artificially created. It didn't happen naturally. So Braille or any other kind of artificial communication system, or for example, during wars, you have these codes, the codified signals that are used during wars, maybe a 3-beep or a 4-beep, extremely complex systems of codified signals. They are also kind of communication. They are also kind of language, but they have very limited use and limited area within which it can be used. For example, the signals during war, they are prepared consciously in such a way that they be understood by very limited people. Because if they are codified signals, obviously you cannot have the whole world understanding what is being said. So those have, again, their own limitations. But human language, however much differing it be within a community, because every person speaks differently, but it's the same language and there is mutual understandability. Today, within this classroom, I'm speaking, everyone is speaking, everyone's got a different way of speaking, but we all understand each other. How is that? So there is a basic margin of movement within which, if it is functioning, we are able to comprehend each other. So that is the uniqueness of human language. Whereas I just told you about the codes signals used during a wartime. Suppose, it's a very simple example. I'm sure there are more complex versions. Suppose 3 red beeps means attack. Now, if instead of those 3 beeps, someone did a 4 beeps, obviously that whole command will mean something else. That means in those kinds of communication systems, the possibility of change, the possibility, a margin of error is very small or almost not there. But human language has this wide possibility that even if there are 10 people in a room and each one is speaking in their own special style, but the same language, those 10 people can understand each other. That is the uniqueness of human language. Well, now, first was this. The second is arbitrariness. I'm explaining it now. Listen carefully. Now, arbitrary, what do you mean by arbitrary? Tell me, someone, what do you mean by arbitrary? Well, arbitrary means something which is tentative, which is temporary, which is not fixed. So that's arbitrary. So they say human language is arbitrary. And what exactly does that mean? That means that words or expressions which are used in human language, they have no inherent link with whatever they are representing. If you say a dog, the word dog in no way resembles the four-legged animal. But that's dog representing that animal simply by linguistic convention. And what do you understand by linguistic convention? It is that modality of usage of terms and words within a community, within that language community, which conveys to you that this particular word means that particular that animal. There is otherwise no such inherent link that dog looks like a dog. That is why they say human language is arbitrary. Why should ghar or a house? Does it look like a house? It's just a word. So what is it exactly that links the term to the thing it signifies? That is the speciality of human language, that within a linguistic community, within a group which understands the language, they have inherently agreed to call that particular animal a dog. Today, just imagine a situation where suddenly you started calling a table a pen, you started calling pen a door, the door a window. Don't you think the entire system would be in a total chaos? Because this link with the object and the word through which you're expressing is so codified, so within a system, that if you try changing the whole thing, then the whole thing is messed up. So it is a very, very systemic, within a system, a codified pattern of communication, which makes this entire arbitrary relation into a very systemic relation. So look at the paradox. You call human communication arbitrary, which is there is no inherent link. But at the same time, it is so inbuilt within a system that you cannot think of calling a dog a cat. A dog, dog, is that animal, and you cannot call it a camel. So this inner codification, this inner understanding of the system is a unique quality of human language, arbitrariness. Then the next part talks about the need of learning. I just told you about animal communication, how it is largely the same across the globe. A bee would buzz in the same way a bee in North America would buzz in the same way as a bee in China. So a dog would perhaps use the same kind of bark for marking danger as in America or in India. So there are certain inherent ways of communication within the animal kingdom, which may not be the same with human communication. And which is the reason that human language can be learned. It can be passed on to another member of the community trying to teach the language because uh, it differs from one point to the other. But animal communication is largely inherent. And that is the reason why animal communication is considered more homogeneous than human communication, because human communication can vary from community to community, region to region, but animal communication is rather the same. A lion would growl in the same way in Africa as a lion in Gir. So, there's a certain homogeneity within the animal communication, whereas human language is extraordinarily wide and it can be created and recreated and also possible to learn. Like you all at some point tried to learn French language. None of you knew French originally, but you learned the language because there was a certain codified pattern of la langue française, and you were initiated into that system. You will, which is why, initially you have errors like je suis 20 ans, because you say I am 20 years, and then in French you say j'ai 20 ans. So, when you're jumping from English to French, you would have such kinds of errors towards the initial stage. And why do these happen? Because your brain has already registered some kind of an English patterning. And when you try to put that same pattern into the new language you're learning, you create errors. But all this, why does it happen? Does a dog try to bark like a French dog? No, it doesn't, because they all bark the same way. But French system, I'm talking about French because we are all in this program, and any language, it has its own codified system into which a newcomer would be initiated in order to teach the language. So there's a possibility of learning another language. Now, here, if you see, has anyone heard of Noam Chomsky? Write down this name, Noam. Noam. And Chomsky, you have it written in the unit if you read. Noam Chomsky is one of the legends of linguistics, very, very old now, almost 95. And he's an American. He's done massive studies in linguistics. So you can go and look up on Noam Chomsky. And one of the most important theories linked to Noam Chomsky is the LAD, L-A-D. He says the LAD, the full form of LAD, is the language acquisition device. It's there in your unit, don't worry. The language acquisition device, as per Chomsky, he says each child is born with this already existing in the brain, the LAD. And given the surroundings in which the child grows up, he absorbs the language from around him and has a natural power of acquiring language. Chomsky denies the role of external agents in language learning. As per Chomsky, the mechanism exists within the human mind of the human child. So this is one of the very important theories about language learning. We'll also discuss other theories in this. But Chomsky is being one of the giants in linguistics. We normally talk about this. And another very important thing that he talked about was, like in English language, you have 26 alphabets. He says that human language with a limited number of signs, linguistic signs, is capable of creating an unlimited source of messages, words, and communication strategies. That is one of his major contributions to understanding human language, that with a limited number of signs and symbols, humans are capable of creating an unlimited number of sentences, words, and models of communication, which is actually true. Just 26 letters, and imagine the how many kinds of sentences and the ways of speech can be created through that. This is just, I'm talking about the English language, so 26 letters. This runs true for all languages, Hindi or any other language, that the number of symbols is finite, limited, but the possibility of creating messages through them is infinite. So these two things, the LAD and this creation of messages, infinite messages through finite symbols, two very important things that Chomsky talked about. Now, the third point is about displacement. This is actually another unique trait of human language, where you can talk in space and time. You can talk about what happened yesterday in Paris. Or an animal cannot communicate like that. The animal can bark immediately to show there is an immediate danger in front. So you know it's that moment, that place, that the animal is signaling about something. But human language is capable of talking about future tense, past tense. You being in India, you're talking about America. So this displacement in time and space is possible only in human language. That is another unique feature. So remember this. Creativity. Now, this creativity is not exactly the way you must be thinking. Creativity is about writing poetry and using ornamental language. Creativity simply means what I was telling you a while back, that there is a possibility of using the same language to say the same thing in n number of different ways. Like when you are explaining something and you want to reiterate, you will say the same thing in 5 different ways, 10 different ways, where the message is the same, but the way you are putting it across is different. That is the creativity quotient of human language, which is not there in animal communication. Now, the next characteristic is what is called double articulation or duality. This also I have briefly mentioned. Why double articulation? Here, from among the existing sound patterns within a language, there are, if human language is broken into the smallest unit, it will come down to a set of sound, ma, ta, like if you look at the Hindi thing, ka, kha, ga, gha, ma, ta, all those are the smallest units of language. It comes down to particular sounds, which you will read in detail in your units on phonetics. Phonetics is the study of sound systems. Phonic, anything to do with sound, is phonetics. So double articulation is where you talk about the sound first, and then you also understand that while in human communication, you just can't be communicating with k, k, g, g, or ma, ta, sa, la. That doesn't make any sense. You can also not have something like arranging those sounds at random. For example, k, l, let's say something like, there's kamal and there's kalam, or if you put the same thing like lakam, you have the same sounds, la, ka, ma, but there is something called kamal, there's something called kalam, but perhaps, I mean, as to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's anything called lakam. So why do you say that lakam is nonsensical? Why is it nonsensical? Because it is not there in the codified system of the language. So the way sounds are arranged or rearranged is the study which we call morphology. Morphology is the science of creation of words. So when I say that Kamal is okay, but Lakam is not okay. So why is Kamal okay? Because the language, the linguistic community has accepted and linked it with a flower, the name of a flower. But Lakam doesn't convey any sense. So whereas the same sounds, la, ka, ma, are also put, you also realize that the order in which they are strung together also is very, very important to the growth or to the development or to the understanding of any language. It cannot be just anything put anywhere. There is a system for it. So that is why they say human language has double articulation, first at the level of sounds and then at the second level of how those sound things are arranged and rearranged. This, of course, also goes on to a third level, which is the study of sentences. Suppose you say, I am going. Okay, accepted. That is I plus am plus going. It's an accepted order of words. But if you say going I am or going am I, although it manages to convey some sense, but anybody would know that this is an ironical sentence. This is not correct. So even the order of words, like I say, lakam, is nonsense. So you have sentences like, if you put the words in the wrong order, then the sentence loses its meaning. So at every step, the putting together of sounds, the putting together of, as words, and then those words also in a certain sequence. These are all building blocks of human language, which are very unique to only human language. So what I mean to say is that these are the features which give it a very unique identity from other models of communication. So this is what we called double articulation. Then there is patterning. This is also very similar to what I was talking about, the sequencing of sounds and the words. I mean, you can't just put everything the way you want. And there is a certain pattern in which things occur. So that gives a systematicity to language. And then the structure dependence. It is about how you can say the same sentence in different ways. One of the examples given here is passivization. Oh, she opened the door is an active voice. You want to put it in a different way. You say, oh, the door was opened by her. This is an act of passivization. You are conveying the same message in a different way. So I had just told you that human language is the only one where to convey the same message, you can use 10 different kinds of sentences and patterns to convey the same thing. Then other characteristics. Since this unit is in English, I think most of you, if you just take out some little time, it's not such a rocket science that you wouldn't understand. Reciprocity, interchangeability, that is, when someone is speaking and the other is listening, the next moment the one who is listening can become a speaker and the one who was speaking can become a listener. That is the reciprocity, and that is the basis of any human communication. Then rapid fading. This is obviously much related to oral communication, because once spoken, it disappears, and then again, it has to be repronounced. So oral thing is rapid disappearing. That is another characteristic. And then spontaneous usage. Human language is normally used within a community as almost as natural as breathing. You don't think before you inhale or you exhale. It's like a part of your being. So spontaneous usage of language at times, depending on the situation, it can be very spontaneous. For example, if you are hurt or if you see something that surprises you, the language that comes out of your mouth might be spontaneous. But if you're in a very formal and a guarded situation, you'll think twice before mentioning. What is important to understand, that human communication at least gives you that possibility of whether you want to have a restrained response or a spontaneous response. But if a dog has to bark, it has to bark. It's not going to think twice before barking. So that's again a speciality of human communication. Turn taking, I just said, it's like the speaker becomes listener, listener becomes speaker, and that's the basis of all communication. Specialization and vocal signals, that means oral language. The vocal signals, in other words, they are talking about oral language, because anything concerned with the voice can come only when you're talking, when you're speaking. It's not anything related to written language or to sign language. No, it's about the oral language pattern. So that's what they're talking about here. And complete feedback, yes. Well, I guess complete feedback, I'd like to think a little more on this. They say that speakers of a vocal signal receive the message themselves as well. Well, I guess it's the same for animal world as well. If a dog barks, he also hears the bark himself. It's not as if only humans hear what they are saying. So this is a complete feedback. I guess it would be like the specialized human language that is used, maybe that way it could be considered a complete feedback. But if it's about whether the one producing the vocal signals receive the message themselves, I think it is common for both the animal and human communication. Think on this point. This is something like, I wouldn't straight away agree on this. So I leave it to you also to think twice on that. Well, then you have the using language. This part, using language, is a very, very simplified version of what at more complex states you would have learned as discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is basically the notion which connects language to socio-cultural communities around you. In other words, even though language as a particular language is a particular language, it's within a certain system, but the socio-linguistic analysis of language says that the spoken language, or even perhaps at some point the written language, differs according to the communication space. If you're talking to your boss, your language will be different. If you're talking to your friend, your language will be different. If you're talking to a child, you'll speak differently. So these are ways in which your surrounding areas determine the type of language used by you. So those are, very simplified versions of what later on we study as discourse analysis and who's speaking to whom, where, why. All these are things which linguists study. And they say that it's the outer reality which determines the kind of language being used. So those are, parts of the sociocultural realities, which is why perhaps a lot of you here, I don't know how many of you must be teachers of soft skills, where you go on to do the mannerisms and the body language while learning a foreign language. You also have to know how to master certain uh, non-verbal signals while in France. For example, they teach you how to do a cheek-to-cheek kiss in France, which is very usual, but for someone coming from another culture, it's very different. So those are kind of non-verbal communications, but very specific to cultures. In Japan, you must have seen those people bow down and present their greetings, or in India, you do a namaskar. So those are culture specific verbal or non-verbal cues that are very much part of language. So whereas linguistics, we normally talk about the language, but the non-verbal and the body language is also very much a part of that entire thing. Now, another dimension they have, handled here is about language and power. A very latest area of work that linguists are very interested in, and it's a fantastic area coming up. How a particular type of language use, how a particular pronunciation, how a particular way of speaking can benefit you or even victimize you. It's called glottal studies. This part, it's called the glottis, the epiglottis. So it's emerged from there. It's the way you talk. Does that impact the power quotient within which you function? For example, it's a very ordinary example in India. If you're having a tough time in a crowd and you suddenly start talking in fluent English, suddenly you find things are kind of okay. They're paying more attention to you. I'm not justifying it. I'm just giving you an example how suddenly using one language can, change your status. Or just the opposite, within a very elitist English-speaking crowd, if someone talks in the vernacular. So you see that look of contempt on a lot of faces. Oh my dear, that person can't even speak English. So these are the things which constitute the basic topics on which language and power studies are based. In India, it is very easy for us to understand because each region has its very specific way of speech. And there is no hierarchy per se. But, it becomes a source of mockery, one region to be laughing or the other region. Oh, they speak like this. Oh, they speak like that. But the point is, it's just another way of speaking. No big deal about it. In fact, in France, there's this social linguist, Philippe Blanchet. He's a professor of social linguistics at Université de Rouen. He's done phenomenal studies on this aspect, which he has termed la glottophobie, glottophobia. And he has actually taken his data from the state of immigrants in France. I'm sure all of you would be aware that a lot of North Africans or Black Africans or from Arab countries, they come as refugees in France. And they have their own specific way of speaking French. And not only in immigrants, I must bring to your notice that there are several regional languages also in France, like Corsican, like Breton, many more which don't find space today because France as a nation accepts only le français as one language. So Philippe Blanchet has done these studies saying that a person, an immigrant, first of all, an immigrant is also a non white. That is the first thing. And then the way they pronounce, you must have noted that the Arab speaking people from North Africa, the Moroccans or the Tunisians, or the ones coming from Black Africa, they have a very unique way of speaking French. So he says that the moment that accent comes in, they are discriminated. And as a linguist, he says there is no reason to do that. But because speaking a certain language in a certain way also gives you access or denies you access to a certain social strata, is why language and power today is becoming such a phenomenal area of study. Even today, I mean, within India, various regions, they imitate, they mimic people. Oh, ye to Punjab se hain, aise bolte hain. Yes, Darshani, yes, please tell me.
Madam, for English as well, we have different way of speaking English. Some people in India only, we speak English with a Hindi accent. Some people speaks English with an American accent.
Absolutely right. This is true for all languages, Darshani. I mean, French, English, even Hindi. People coming from different regions would speak the language in their own way, and which shows a very impactful presence of the influence of the mother tongue. And given the fact that India is a treasure house of innumerable languages, each mother tongue will have a different way. I mean, today you don't look at a person and you hear, you know, it's someone from Bengal. Unless one has a very, unique way that you cannot really make out where the person is from. Normally, we do carry traces of our mother tongue. So, and that should not ever come up to be a source of discrimination. But even within our country, we are, we are witnessing that always. Oh my God, ye to waise bolta hai. Oh, that person can't even speak proper English. Oh, he's got very, that accent. Whereas, I'm sorry to say, but most of the French that I have met, they have horrible English. The way they speak English. But you ask the large number of Indians how they find the French, the way they speak English, they'll think twice before criticizing them, because they put the whites at a higher strata, and they think whatever they say must be good. So for a white to be speaking terrible English, an Indian will never accept that. But someone from, let's say, Bihar is speaking English in a Bihari accent, they will immediately mock the person. These are aspects of sociolinguistics which have nothing to do with language per se, but it is the perception. It is the intersocial interaction patterns that humans have evolved, and they mock at that. Do you ever think a dog would mock at another dog barking in a different way? That, oh my God, I think this dog is from that region, so I should laugh at him. It is only possible within human language, because human language, however much codified a system it is, it carries traces of your place of origin. It also conveys how privileged a background you come from, or how humble a background you come from. Those are the things which create the basis for studies in power and language. And this was just supposed to be an initiation, but this happens to be one of my very, very favorite areas of research personally. So I just get a lot more carried away in this. So, but then this is just, to initiate into why you say that language and power is also a very important area of studies in linguistics. Now, in fact, let me quickly add to this, because we've talked about language and power. In your block 3, in fact, the last unit of your block 3, if you notice, there is a whole unit on language standardization. You still have bodies which say that's the standard language. In French also, they say Parisian French is the standard French. And they would also mock at French from other regions of France. Oh, they speak French like that. Or like Darshini just said about English. Again, I would come to that one basic thing I had said long time back about Francophonie. Why do these languages, European languages, have so many ways in which people pronounce? Because when they went and colonized other countries, those people also started speaking their language, and obviously there were different ways in which they spoke. Like Indian English I'm sure there are a lot of Indians who speak better English than the British, but they have evolved their own English. There's Australian English, there's American English, there's Indian English. And all these are because of the global spread of that one language. But the natives of the other countries, they have obviously developed their own ways of using the language. And that ideally should not become a source of discrimination. But it does. In fact, you can go and read up on the net. Recently, in the French elections, there was this particular senator from one part of France who was making his election speech. And his speech was very loaded, very influenced by that accent of that particular region. And there was this huge uproar and mocking happening in French media about, oh my God, this politician speaks such terrible French. And why terrible French? Because that French was not very close to Parisian French. So that is what is called glottophobia. That is what is called power tussle and, language. So these are the ways in which, I guess, as matured language learners, you should learn to relook at the way people speak around you and try to observe so many associated features with that. That's a very, very important part of sociolinguistics. Well, that does with this unit. I have been rushing through it, and I just request you to go through this. Now I shall come to take a 5-minute thing for any further discussions on this, any further questions you have to ask me. I know I've been rushing through, but let me know if you want to talk about something. Yes? Is it all clear? Yes, Darshan. Yeah, tell me.
How the
I'm sorry?
from the tongue, that
Yeah.
language came.
Yeah, just come again. I didn't get your question.
Language.
Yeah.
The term language, how it is derived from.
Yeah, language is,
from tongue and lung.
Yeah, because the tongue obviously is the crucial organ that allows you to speak. In fact, for people with speech disorders, the clinical disorder begins with the tongue. Either the tongue doesn't function, or some children are born without tongue. So the tongue becomes the basic organ of speech. So that was from long to language. And then you have all these words, lingua. They're all coming from the Latin root. So that's how language is, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any other question? I have also, if I must remind you, your assignments have been uploaded. I mean, I don't know if they're still uploaded. That is a technical thing. I don't know if they have. I have sent them, but I have sent you also on the WhatsApp group. So you're free to start your work from your end. It will reflect on the website this week sometime. So those are also very light assignments. I've given you just 700 or 750 words each question. There are 5 questions, out of which you pick out 2, and that's your assignment for linguistics. And I may also clarify that your end terms in linguistics will also be conducted in English, just like the courses in English. So, well, anything else that you want me to clarify?
The address for sending
I'm sending you
memoir.
because I want to send it in written, so I'll send you after the class on your WhatsApp.
Okay.
It will be written, so no more confusions on that. Anything else someone wants to ask? Now, either you've understood everything or haven't understood anything. So, well, tell me. Yes, Niranjanji, please.
Yeah, ma'am, I have a question that, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, please.
Okay. So, as we know that there is this kind of division between the study of languages, between diachronic and synchronic study.
Yes.
So, the older school of philology, which was diachronic, that was mostly made of contributions by German linguistics. And the modern linguistics synchronic study, I am not sure whether it actually started with Saussure or maybe some others also simultaneously contributed to a synchronic study of language. But the French had always been great grammarians. They have a great tradition of grammar. Now in the field of linguistics, do they have a tradition of any kind?
You're very right. Now, since I'm answering a question to this larger group, I must first specify. Would you also, Niranjanji, I'm going to ask you to help your friends in class understand what you mean by diachronic and synchronic. So,
well, diachronic means through time. So, diachronic study of language is a study of the history of language, its development through the ages, and it is also called philology, which is mostly the German linguists contributed to this tradition. And in Indian universities, the school of linguists, they were originally they all belonged to this ancient school of linguistics. But with the development of modern linguistics, which is synchronic, means study of language at a particular time, all different aspects of language at a particular time. So, synchronic, the time remains the same, but parallel studies of different aspects of language of that time.
absolutely.
So that developed
Yes.
into modern linguistics.
Yes. Thank you so much. I wanted this coming from you because you, being a scholar of English literature, you would have also known. So, diachronic studies, as Niranjanji rightly said, it's the study across centuries, across time, what we often also refer to as longitudinal studies. And so it's got a bit of history in it, how language evolved and how this happened earlier on. It was like that, and now it is like that. So that's across time. And synchronic studies are within a certain spot of time. So what he says that generally the Germanic school promoted the diachronic studies, and the synchronic, that is within time, was promoted by, he wants to know if the French had played any major role there. Now, first of all, Saussure, although he wrote and he worked with French, he was not a French. He was a Swiss. And he worked on structural linguistics. When you talk about structural linguistics, you essentially talk about the various parts of language. You dissect it into, and the most famous bit that Saussure contributed was langue and parole. He says he made two huge distinctions. Langue, which according to him was the ideal, the larger, the le trésor linguistique, the linguistic treasure of a community was the langue, the ideal thing existing as a larger framework. and parole. Parole was the individual speech of every person. So, as I was telling you, that within a language, there will be five people, there are five different ways of speaking, and that is the parole. But the langue, that is as a system, it remains as a constant. And within that, with a certain margin of deviation, different people have their own ways of speaking. In technical language, we also refer to it as idiolects. So, parole is generally langue and parole. One of the most important contributions of Saussure was when he said that langue as a system is the larger framework, but parole uh, is the actual speech. If you translate the word parole, it's speech. So he talked about these two distinctions. And when you talk about langue, it is closer to the notion of diachronic studies that Niranjanji was talking about, because langue as a system has existed over a longitudinal period, that you see a certain language has existed and has seen slow transformations and changes across the years. But parole, just a second, Bernard. But parole is more on the synchronic uh, side, because parole is something that you speak, and that is that momentary speech, that is parole. So diachronic and synchronic, that way I'd say, Niranjanji, that the French tradition has been more to do with structural linguistics and obviously the synchronous bit. But as I repeat, Saussure was a newcomer. You compare his work to Panini, I mean, he took it all from there. So, French have been, yes, they have been claimed to be great grammarians, but nothing bigger than India. And I would like to, give a long lecture on Panini and the contribution of Indian linguistics to the world. Unfortunately, that's not as flamboyant and flashy as the Western world, but uh, I think the Germans were ones to recognize, and Max Miller, he greatly appreciated the works of likes of Panini and Bhartrhari. These people, they had massively worked on the Sanskrit grammar. And what you see among the French grammarians or even the Germanic tradition is just a little fallout in time. So, yes, that's it. Yes, there was Bernard who wanted to ask something, please.
No, I just wanted to share that Louis Cathos Cans, right, 15. He was the one who promoted literature. So during the Renaissance period, there was a revolution uh, where people were. There was a huge shift in the culture where the literature was promoted, right? In which century was it? No, 17th.
If you're talking about
If I'm
Louis XIV, yeah, he was
Louis,
done away in 1789. So that's one thing. So it could have
yeah,
only been before that.
uh,
Yes.
it would be Louis 15, right?
Are
No.
you talking about Louis XIV or Louis XV?
During the Renaissance period, there was a king who promoted literature and art. No. So who would that be?
I think if you're talking about Renaissance, there has to be a certain period that the Renaissance is identified with. And Renaissance
Okay.
only started blooming after the end of monarchy. Before that, it was what you call the European Dark Ages. It's l'âge de la lumière, which you call Renaissance and awakening. So, yes, Niranjanji.
I think that he is talking about Louis XIV, who promoted all these great 17th century writers, and basically the neoclassical school flourished in France at that time.
It's
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
it's
Yes.
Yes. So there were court poets and court writers also who were, some of them who were embraced by the courts, and also some of them who were punished. For
If
example,
I'm not wrong, there was a king who summoned all the literature writers and promoted them to write more, so that in order to in French, if I'm not wrong, I am not sure which king was that. Yeah.
In fact, this entire movement of writing in French was in itself a very big point of transformation in French literature, because earlier on it was throughout Latin, the use of Latin. And have you people heard of René Descartes, the Cartesian theories? Has anyone of you heard of René Descartes?
Oui, madame.
Je pense que donc je suis.
Voilà. His most famous saying, cogito ergo sum, that is something in Latin. He says, I think, therefore I am. So he was essentially a mathematician, a big scholar of geometry, and also a great philosopher. He's called the father of Western philosophy. So he was the one who first talked about, breaking free of the church and the monarchy. And he talked also about independent thinking, rationalism, human mind, and independence of thought. So the first extraordinary thing about Descartes is that his most famous work, Discours de la méthode, he wrote in French. Because in those days, most of the stuff was written in Latin. And just like Tulsidas, he didn't write Ramcharitmanas in Sanskrit because he wanted the common man to be able to access that. So did Descartes. He wrote the thing in French. So writing something in French, you see, it sowed the seeds of rational thinking and independent thinking compared to the constraints laid down by the church or by the monarchy. So that was one way of bringing into fold the common man also. And a reflection of that is often French is called, I'm sure most of you know, la langue de Molière. But Molière, paradoxically, used to use a lot of language used by the working class people in his works, which is, in a way, he was bringing in the common man into great literature. And Molière's works have included those people because of the style he adopted in a way that was more inclusive than making it exclusive and putting all those big Latin jargons and how the people wouldn't understand. So one of the biggest credits I'd give to René Descartes is not only emphasizing about independent, la pensée libre, independent thought. It was also the usage of French instead of Latin to include the common man. So again, these are also aspects of linguistics. You see, I was just talking about language and power. Why do you think most of it was in Latin or in our own country in Sanskrit? Because it was an attempt to closet knowledge to a certain section of people. They thought if they would put it in the common man's language, then everyone would have access to knowledge. But someone like Tulsidas chose to write Ramcharitmanas in a language that the common man could understand. So, yes, Ashita, what is your question? Can you just speak it? I didn't read that properly. Where are you, Ashita? Can you just speak out your question? I didn't read that properly. Well, it's noisy there. Well, she's asking if French came from English. Her question is, she thinks French came from English. I would like to ask, it's an open question I'm putting to all of you. Can anyone
It's the other
tell
way
me?
around. No.
They have
It's the other
different
way
roots.
around.
They have different roots, ma'am, I think. French is a Romance language, which is related more to French, to Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian. And English is a language more related to German and Dutch. But of course, all these languages came from Latin. The other thing is France or the French kings, they ruled over England for quite some time. So there are many French words which are used in English, particularly the upper crust words. The words which are used, which are associated with more with class and the upper level of society, not the common man's words. So I think there are more French words in English than English words in French. That is
Oh,
because
well,
of the history. The French ruled over England for quite a few centuries, I think, in the
yes.
Middle Ages or the early Middle
Very
Ages.
good, very good, Arvind. You have almost 80% of the information correct and very well informed. To begin with, Ashita, I hope you're hearing me. French, as Arvind rightly said, belongs to the family of Romance languages. You have two major chunks, the Romance languages and the Germanic languages. Romance languages include French, Portuguese, Italian, and Spanish. And there's some other language called Romansh also. So, but the larger ones I just told you, and the Germanic.
Gauls, they say Gauls, no ma'am. The origin, French origin, Gaul. Gauls on group.
See, the Romance language generally trace their origin to Latin anyway. So I'm talking about the language family here. The language family is the Romance, the Romance family of languages, whereas English belongs to a different family. It is the Germanic, where you have German and English and the Nordic languages also, perhaps Scandinavian, etc. They are different. And also, as Arvind was rightly saying, France uh, did rule England towards the beginning of the 11th century, 12th century. They were ruling England. And so French used to be for very long the language of the ruling class, the language of the elites. And in a way, it has till date continued to be a very elitist language. For a very long time in Europe, also across the world, it was called the lingua franca. But then, of course, that's a different story again, how England conquered large parts and how English became what it is today. So those are different things. But as far as you saying that French came from English, no, that's not true. French did not come from English. They're two separate families. And today, French is actually like someone said, Niranjanji, you said, or who said that French has more English words, or who was saying about more English words?
I said that English has more French words than French has English words because
Yes,
of the historical reason that France ruled England.
very true. So there was a point in time where there were a lot of French terms within the English language, and that they continue to be used today also, whether it's terms like raison d'être or fin de semaine, or small little terms like the especially the names of dishes, etc. Well, uh, so at one point, it is certainly true that there were too many French terms and words inserted into the English language. Very true. And largely with special sectors like fashion and food, wines. So you had a lot of these French terms there. But recently, towards the end of 20th century and the beginning of 21st century, the influence of English terms within French language has, it's just increasing phenomenally. Whether it's the technology world, there you have most of the words in English. You have terms like, uh, you know, marketing and weekend. You don't say fin de semaine anymore. So those are the ways where English is making its mark. And as French language students, you people must have noticed that a lot of courses in France, in French universities, are now being offered in English, because the spread of English and the hold of English, whether they like it or not, it's certainly increasing more than French. French continues to be an elitist and a very language of long the luxe, as they say, luxury language. But as far as outreach is concerned, English has certainly spread out more. And it is the French people themselves who are adopting a lot more English today. In fact, we have your teachers going from India to teach English to the French students, isn't it? You have that program from the embassy where they send Indian students to go and teach English to the French. So, well, that's it. In fact, now after having done this unit in your course, I think each one of you should be able to look at the processes. Yes, assistant d'anglais, Ashita, yes. So now you should be able to look at language as a phenomenon around you. It's no longer about just language. You all are now doing advanced studies in language, literature, and linguistics. So try to look at it like matured students. And well, that's all I have to say for today. Tomorrow I'll take up Unit 3 and 4. And since they are in English, put in a little bit of effort. It's not so difficult. You'll easily capture that. Today evening, I send you the address for sending in your projects. But I repeat, projects you can send till the end of October. But for assignments, I think the last date is end September. Beyond that, I think there's a bit of late fee added. So assignments are like, more important at this point. You can think of winding up faster, and projects can happen end October as well. Well, anything else that you want to ask me? Yes, Barna.
Yes, ma'am. Then, if English rules, what is the future of this foreign language? Are French not aware, or they are not willing to protect or propagate their language? Or because in India also, when we speak Bengali, we start speaking. How many people speak Bengali out of India? Hindi, always they say no, more people speak Hindi out of India than Bengal. We have a discussion amongst ourselves. So what about France? They are okay, I know they will say it's a luxury language or language of artists or elite or something. Then what is the future? If they will start speaking and spreading English, then what will happen to their people in future? It's a different question. I do not know whether it's like a fool I am asking the question or I should not ask these questions, but it has come to my mind. That's why.
I'm very glad it's come to your mind. That is the first proof that you're thinking. So what you say is very relevant. It should come to your mind. And if it has come to your mind, that means you have very well followed what I'm trying to say. There is a basic adage in language studies. They say, जो भाषा रोटी नहीं देती वो भाषा मर जाती है. And I truly believe in the truth of this language, of this saying. Today, if English is becoming the language around the world, it is also because employment related to English language is higher than employment related to French language. Today, if by learning French, you can have access to 20 job opportunities, someone knowing English will definitely have at least 100 job opportunities because the person knows English. But that way, Indian students are terribly lucky because they know English, excellent English, and they also know some foreign language like French. So it's a win-win situation for Indian learners. That is why learning a foreign language within India gives you enormous scope for reaching out as a global citizen today. People in China, I was in Thailand once presenting a paper, and I saw the level of Thai students in English. It was pathetic. So however good they be at technology, if they were not able to access information in English or even to interact with English colleagues or English clients, forget Thai, look at Chinese students. They have immense problems with English compared to Indian students. So the thing is that we are enormously privileged to have English as our second language, and most of us are competent enough with English. On top of that, if we know 2 or 3 foreign languages, there's no stopping us. And as far as if French, why aren't they thinking about it? I have personally seen posters all over France and Paris saying, learn English. English classes from such and such time. Why are they doing this? Because they know that if they have to interact with a larger global population, they have to diversify, they have to open up. If you just restrict yourself to only French, even they know that it's going to be difficult in a while. Yes, Niranjanji, one of my dogs, I had to chase out, the other one continues.
Yeah, it's a lovely dog, ma'am.
Thank you. So, yes. So that's what Barna. I always tell my students that as Indian learners, we are supremely lucky to be so good with languages. And let's use it to our fullest benefits. That's what I can say. On an average, French, I mean, if you talk about the French language today, on an average, it is treated as L4. In language studies, they say L1, L2, L3. So L1 is the mother tongue, L2 is English, and L3 would be some regional language, whether Punjabi, Bengali, Gujarati, whatever. And then comes the chance for a foreign language. So largely something like French or something else is an L4. Look at the amazing repertoire that we are surrounded with. And I think we should all use it to the maximum benefit today. Well, anything else? I'm done from my end. I'm done with.
Merci beaucoup.
À vous aussi. Merci beaucoup d'être là, d'avoir patienté pendant le cours. Demain, on va avoir cours à partir de 11h, comme toujours, 11h à 13h. And please go through your units 3 and 4 of block 1. So we go through that, right? Okay then, thank you very much.
Merci, madame.
Merci, madame.
Merci, madame.
Merci, Mapu.
Merci, madame.
Merci, madame.
Adame. À bientôt.
Adi professor. Merci.
Merci, madame.